Hello, I'm David Hughes. Welcome to Your Perfect Body, the podcast of the Esoteric Teaching Community. Today's selection is an essay entitled How to Understand Krishna, Part 3. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is teaching Arjuna about spiritual values. Why? When Arjuna saw all his enemies on the battlefield, he could not bring himself to fight against his cousins and other relatives, even his grandfather and guru. But this was a complete dereliction of his duty. Therefore Krishna chastised him. Klaibhyang masma gama partha naitattvai upapadyate krudram hridaya dorbalyam taktotishta parantapa. O son of Pritha, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart, and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. Bhagavad Gita 2:3. You cannot understand this esoteric teaching philosophy with material intelligence. It requires time, practice, and careful study. Unintelligent people, if they simply see that, oh, Krishna is enticing Arjuna to fight, therefore Krishna is immoral, that means they are trying to see Krishna with their material vision. You cannot see Krishna as he really is with material eyes. You have to see Krishna with spiritual eyes. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Janma karma cha me divyam evang yo veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Bhagavad Gita 4:9. Divyam. Krishna's activities are all transcendental, divyam. If anyone can simply understand these transcendental activities of Krishna, then he immediately becomes liberated. Not just ordinary liberation, but for going back to home, back to Godhead. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti konteya. He does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. This is the greatest liberation. As we have discussed, there are different types of liberation: Sayuja, Sarupya, Sarshti, Salokya, and Samipya. Of these 5 kinds of liberation, Sayuja is the lowest. Sayuja means to merge into the existence of Brahman, the impersonal aspect of God. This Brahmalaya, merging into the impersonal Brahman, is a kind of liberation, but it means permanently extinguishing one's individuality. The Mayavadis, or the Jnani Sampradaya, want to merge into the Brahman existence, and that is called Sayuja Mukti. But for a devotee, this Sayuja Mukti is just like hell. Sri Prabodhananda Saraswati, a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, has said, Kaivalyam narakataye. The happiness of becoming one with the Supreme Lord, which is aspired for by the Mayavadis, is considered hellish. That oneness is not for pure devotees. There are many pseudo-devotees who theorize that in the conditioned state we may worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but that ultimately there is no personality. They speculate that since the absolute truth is impersonal, one can imagine a personal form of the impersonal absolute truth for the time being. But as soon as one becomes liberated, the worship stops. That is the theory put forward by the Mayavadi philosophy. Actually, the impersonalists do not merge into the existence of the Supreme Person, but into his impersonal bodily luster, called the Brahmajyoti. Although the Brahmajyoti is qualitatively non-different from his personal body, that sort of oneness is not accepted by a pure devotee, because the devotees experience greater pleasure from devotional service than from the so-called pleasure of merging into his existence. That's spiritual suicide. The greatest pleasure is to serve the Lord. The two syllables Krsna literally mean the greatest pleasure. Devotees are always thinking about how to serve him. They are always designing newer and more original ways and means to serve the Supreme Lord, even in the midst of the greatest obstacles of material existence. This is very glorious and beautiful. The impersonalists think that the description of the pastimes of the Lord are mythological stories, but actually they are not stories. They are historical facts. Pure devotees accept the narrations of the pastimes of the Lord not as stories, but as absolute truth. They derive the highest aesthetic and ontological states of pleasure, technically called rasa, from these transcendental narrations about the Lord. And this transcendental pleasure is eternal. Once attained, it just keeps increasing. So for a Vaishnava, Kaivalyam, or monistic liberation, to merge into the existence of the Supreme, is compared with hell, because for one who has accepted Sayuja Mukti, there is no chance to perform devotional service and relish the ever-increasing pleasure of bhakti rasa. Kaivalyam narakayate, tridashapur akashapushpayate. For a pure devotee, Kaivalya, merging into the existence of Brahman, the Brahman effulgence, Brahmajyoti, is no better than living in hell. Similarly, he considers promotion to the heavenly planets, Tridashapur, just another kind of phantasmagoria. Chaitanya Chandramrita 5. The Jnanis, or Mayavadis, are anxious to merge into the existence of the Brahman effulgence. But for the Karmis, the fruitive workers, their highest aim is how to be elevated to the higher planetary systems, Svargaloka, where Lord Indra and Brahma live. In other words, the Karmis' ambition is to go to heaven. In all other religious literature, all other scripture except the esoteric teaching, their aim is how to be elevated to the heavenly planets. Heaven is described in the Vedic literature as Tridashapur. Tridashapur means there are 33 million demigods, and they each have their own planet. Tridashapur Akasha Pushpate. Akasha Pushpa means a flower in the sky, or something imaginary. A flower should be in the garden, but if somebody imagines a flower in the sky, it is just something imaginary. So for a devotee, promotion to the heavenly planets is just like an imaginary flower in the sky. It's very nice, but what is the use of it? It is just another temporary material pleasure. So this describes the processes and the results of the karmi and the jnani. Then, dur dantendriya kala sarpa patali prokahata dangstrayate. This describes the yogis. Yoga, real yoga, not the phony commercial variety available in the West. Real yoga means indriya samyama, controlling the senses. That is the authentic yogic practice. Our material bodily senses are very strong. Just like we Vaishnavas first of all try to control the tongue, so the yogis try to control the senses, not only the tongue, but all the senses, by some mystic process. Why are they trying to control the senses? Because the senses are just like poisonous serpents. Wherever such snakes live and whatever they touch becomes contaminated with their poison. Just like our material sex impulse. As soon as there is illicit sex, then there are so many difficulties. Of course, nowadays it has become all too easy to engage in illicit sexual affairs. Therefore, everyone's lives have become chaotic and strident. As soon as one is touched by the poisonous serpent of sensual desire, then so many karmic difficulties and complications are there, preventing any self-realization. Therefore, Vedic civilization is very strict about illicit sex, because the whole aim is how to go back to home, back to Godhead. Not sense gratification, eat,